B-roll. What is it? Why does everyone keep on going on about it? Why do we need it? And how do we get it? That's what we're covering in this tutorial. This is one in a series of filmmaking and content creation tutorials. If that's something you're into, think about subscribing, hit that notification bell, and be kept up to date with the latest releases. So, on to B-roll. What is B-roll? B-roll is anything that isn't the main subject of the shot. If we have a conversation between two people, we'll have camera shots of the two people. We'll see what they're saying, we'll see their reaction shots. That will be what's called A-roll. Not this kind of a roll, but you get what I mean. B-roll is then used to intercut between the main action, to add a bit of depth to our story. Why do we need B-roll? Firstly, B-roll will add to the tone of the piece. We see two people sitting across from each other. They look calm, they look collected. B-roll then goes to show us a foot frantically tapping on the floor. And we see that there is tension in that scene. We see that there's something underneath the exterior that this person is putting on. We as the audience read the tone of that piece. There's suspense. Number 2, it provides flexibility when we're editing. What does that mean? It means that with B-roll, we can then determine what pace, what rhythm we want to set in that scene. And if we want to start ramping it up, or we want to start pulling it back a bit. B-roll will enable us to do that. It gives us a lot more control of that rhythm that is then translated to something that the audience will respond to. Edgar Wright, when he shot his first film, A Fistful of Fingers, talked about the fact that when he got to the editing suite, he didn't have enough coverage to pace the film in the way that he wanted. And he's actually said that from that point onwards, that has always been a chip on his shoulder, and he has always gone the other way and ensured that he has too much coverage. Number 3, it establishes the details of the character and the environment. So we are able to bring the audience more fully into the world of the story that we're creating. Filmmaking is all about story, and that's exactly what we want to do. For example, we cut away to a close-up of a photograph on a mantelpiece and we see a happy family. And that tells us something. We have a shot that sweeps over a city landscape and we see lots of high-rises. And this tells us about the world that we're in. B-roll isn't all about wide shots, it isn't all about close-ups. We need to change that up. And the way that we know how to change that up is by thinking, what other information do we want to show our audience? Number 4 is about breaking up the monotony. So if you have a scene where there is just a character, the camera's on that character's face and they are talking, then very quickly us as an audience will switch off. So they'll still listen, but visually they will disengage. B-roll enables us as the audience to work to keep up with the story. So no matter what you drop in as B-roll, we will see that and we will try to work to keep up with why we have just been given that piece of information. Everything that we see, we will naturally, as human beings, try and translate. Try and make sense of why we have seen that at that point. And in doing that, that keeps us engaged. Point 5 is using B-roll to cover up any errors and mistakes that we may make. We're going through the footage and we see that there's a bit of a shake. We see that there's a bit of a loss of focus during a scene. Not a problem. We drop B-roll on the top of that and the audience is none the wiser. We are able to keep the story moving forward and the scene to seamlessly play out without the audience being aware. B-roll is there to save the day at those moments in the edit. How to shoot B-roll. Firstly, plan ahead. As with any kind of filming, it will save you so much time in the long run. So think of the tasks that you need to capture with the camera. Think of things like how it's going to be edited together, any transitions that you're going to use between shots. Scout the location. If at all possible, go to the space that you're going to use, have a look around, see what light sources you have there, see what interesting angles you can capture. Because again, any of that work that you do beforehand is going to give you a much better idea. And especially for B-roll, this is going to enable you to get those gorgeous shots that really bring your production to the next level. Don't get stuck doing the same shots with the same lens at the same angle for the same length. Mix it all up. Do some wide shots, go into some close-ups, add some movement. Think of the angles, above, below, moving in, pulling out, all those kind of things. Make sure you don't get stuck in that rut. All of these things will again keep us engaged. Shoot more than enough. Going back to what I said about Edgar Wright, make sure that when you sit down at the desk, you're not thinking, I wish I'd got this, I wish I had more time. There's nothing to link these two scenes together. I was recently talking to a director who talked about using a 20-80 rule. Now, he was talking about documentary and about talking heads, but that can apply to a scene of dialogue in a film. It can apply to any kind of content that you're creating. So he said that with the talking heads, that took up 20% of his time, 20% of his footage as well. On the flip side of that, he said that he then spent 80% of his time and 80% of the footage was of cutaways. You might think that you've nailed the scene between those two people. You might think that the tension has built brilliantly and that that's it done. But have a look around. See what is in that environment that's interesting, that can reinforce that story that you're telling. Think of the frame rate that you're using. Don't get stuck in slow-mo. 120 frames per second looks fantastic, but choose the times to use that. Move the story along. I know it's difficult. I know you have this footage that you've taken 2 hours maybe to capture, but if it doesn't suit the story, then drop it. Finally, the thing that really adds to B-roll is the audio. So as you're planning out the list of things that you want to capture, the list of images that you have, then always be thinking of the sounds, because those sounds will really help us. They will immerse us in that scene, in that world, in that story that you're telling. So that is the end of the B-roll tutorial. If it was helpful, think of subscribing and hitting that notification bell, and it really, really does help this channel out, so I would really appreciate it. Think of dropping a comment in the link below if there is anything that you'd like these tutorials to focus on, if you've any questions in terms of filmmaking or content creation, and that might give me some ideas for the kind of tutorials that you guys are looking for. And until the next one, make sure you go out there and create.